useful tools that we can use to think about movies and get a broader sense of what's going on. And one of these tools is outer form. Now, outer form refers to a genre's visual elements, and there's another version that is called inner form. And so we're going to get into a full discussion, but to read about this, outer form and inner form, check out an essay called The Western, Genre and Movies by Douglas Pye. You'll find it in the Film Genre Reader, edited by Barry Keith Grant. Make sure to look for the most updated edition of that book, which is the 4th at the time that I'm making this course. But for now, here's a quick breakdown of outer form that will help you understand its power as one of the frameworks of genre. And by using a term like outer form, Pye is showing us how we can be quite methodological in how we describe genres based on their look. So outer form equals basically visual structure. It's the form of a film at a visual level and something that can be subdivided into all kinds of elements that are distinct from inner form, which we'll be talking about. So outer form elements include setting. And setting is one of the most obvious outer form elements because it's what we see in the entire film. The entire time we're watching a movie, we're looking at some kind of mise en scène. And when we're watching a film, even if the setting is in an abstract psychological space, like you might see in a certain scene in The Big Lebowski, we still have mise en scène, we still have setting. And one thing that we can look at when we think about the Western is that Westerns typically take place outdoors. They take place in the countryside and maybe the desert, mountains, sometimes the forest. Or when they take place indoors, it's not just any kind of indoors, but a special kind of indoors. So saloons, jails, historically specific jails, courtrooms, ranch houses, hotels, riverboats, brothels, and other places that are very typical for people who either live outdoors or who wander from town to town. So it could be their tents, or it could be inside of a teepee, and so forth. Another visual element that belongs to outer form, and it's a structure when you think about it, is the clothing that characters wear. So in the Western, clothes include wide-brimmed hats, open-neck shirts, scarves with their open-neck shirts, tight jeans, boots, chaps, spurs, old cavalry uniforms, for example, and the natives may be wearing costumes, and they're very specific costumes, and some of those costumes will designate which tribe that the natives come from. You also have tools of the trade, so rifles, Colt 45s, Winchester Springfield rifles. In some Westerns, you'll even see muskets. And notice that the choice of guns is sometimes used for historical accuracy, but oftentimes it's not. It's not about historical accuracy at all. The choice of weapons involves stylistic and aesthetic intentions of the filmmakers. So for example, there's a big difference between how you cock a Winchester and how you cock a Lee Enfield 303. And that difference changes how you feel about the characters and the dread that you might feel in particular situations, or you can feel very empowered by the way that the character is handling that gun. And details like these really make a film special. It can make it inauthentic. It can make it many different effects. And so tools of the trade are really, really important. And they also can help you understand what kind of character they are. So the size of the weapon, if it's a whip, if it's a knife, if they're using bows and arrows. Maybe there are cannons involved if the Western involves a military element. This is all very important, and the tools of the trade help say things about a character. You also have horses, right? White horses may indicate that there's a good guy. Maybe there's a bad guy. Horses can tell you so much. I mean, if the bad guy's on a black horse. They not only tell you that you're watching a Western, but the animals help you differentiate all kinds of things. If they are like white settlers will use saddles. Indians will ride bareback. Then there's the case of people not riding horses at all. So doctors and judges, they will prefer to ride in carriages, and that's part of showing off their social status. So if you've seen a movie called Stagecoach, which I highly recommend, then there are all kinds of indicators regarding where characters sit. So women have to sit in a particular place. The sheriff sits in a particular place. This is all really important. So consider watching Stagecoach for your homework, and if you haven't seen it for a while, revisit it. Now, finally, there are outer form elements like trains, old mines, general stores, old forts, and banks. And banks are really, really interesting. So, they can represent positive or negative forces in the society of a story. They can represent the virtue of an honest industry or the evils and corruption a big business attacking the lives of settlers. If you've ever seen a series like Deadwood, you'll notice, especially near the end of that series, that the bank functions in this way, in a very interesting way. And you also have Swearengen's brothel. And that's an interesting location to look at as well, because it switches between being a force of virtue and a force of evil, sometimes in the same episode. But ultimately, Westerns are not really about these outer elements. Westerns are about the people. They are about the people who live with these elements. And in a similar way, we might say that an episode of Star Trek is not about warp speed or phasers set to stun. It's not about this world in which you can say, beam me up, Scotty, and these weird sounds will come and you'll be transported from one place to another. Rather, it's about communities of people who live in this environment and they share carefully defined missions. So let's look at how we can think about the difference between science fiction and a Western based on the fact that it's about the people who have these tools as opposed to about the tools themselves. So you probably recognize this. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Now, not only is this preamble to each episode of Star Trek incredibly specific, but you could easily change a few keywords so it could describe a Western. So have a listen. Texas, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Caravan Enterprise. Its 5-year mission to explore strange new plateaus, to seek out trade with new tribes, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Well, it's not nearly as sexy, but it illustrates the point that the movie isn't really about the outer form elements. A Western or a sci-fi is not about that. You could easily translate the opening of Star Trek to many other genres, and you could take all those stories and place them into other genres because it's not about the outer form elements. Outer form elements are a framework. They're visual elements in which a story is told that affects the kind of story that it can be within that genre. But there are all kinds of movies, for example, in something we're going to look at called The Searchers, where someone is kidnapped and the hero hunts down the kidnapper. Now, the film The Searchers takes place in the Old West. You see the hero hunting down the kidnapper in the context of all the trappings of horses, guns, etc. And we learn about the characters by how they interact with these things. And their characters are shaped by historical circumstances, and the things they do are in response to the environment and the tools at hand. But at the end of the day, the core story of kidnapping and reunion could be told in any setting. So for your homework, in addition to looking at Stagecoach and looking at a few episodes of Deadwood, the core Western I want you to view is John Ford's The Searchers. It combines many of the outer form elements we've just looked at in stellar ways that will help you see them in clear detail. And The Searchers also features the 3 core inner form elements that we're going to turn to next. So before you get started with your homework, before you start watching these movies, post your thoughts about Western outer form elements. Are there any that I've missed? And please make sure to join the discussion and see what others are posting so that you can be part of the growth of your ideas about genre.